It's time to get off the sidelines and into the fray. My name's Erik Mansur, and I'm the VP of Product Marketing at Crayon, and this is the Product Marketing Alliance's podcast dedicated to all things competitive intelligence. This episode is something I am, particularly excited about, and I think you can already hear it in my voice. It's about creating a culture of competitive intelligence within your organization. See, in the world of politics, you often hear talk about trying to get more voters into the proverbial tent. With competitive intelligence, it's less about getting your teammates to come inside. It's more about making the tent itself that much bigger. To talk about using competition as a catalyst for collaboration, we've got Patrick Wall, the head of competitive intelligence for Imperva. And this is not his first product marketing role. He's had stints at Neo4j, Oracle, Cambridge Semantics, and DataWatch before this job. And you could probably name at least one competitor for each of those companies off the top of your head. So Patrick's had competitive intelligence in his head and on his list of things to do for quite some time.
So right off the bat, actually, when I became a product marketer,
really,
and the reason why was I came from being an SC, and as an SC, sales engineer, you care so much about competitive, right? And so then I moved into product marketing, and as a technical individual, I cared about the competition. And so I immediately kind of was drawn to, okay, how do we help to enable sales to be better at competitive intelligence? And so that started in product marketing, just as a product marketing manager. And then over time, I kind of built a little niche, and then I actually went into roles dedicated to competitive intelligence, and I love it.
So you almost as a product marketer you were born in the crucible of enterprise sales first. Like, you recognize the value and the power and the scope of recognizing what your competition is up to as a result of the fact that your sales team were always clamoring for this kind of information.
Absolutely. I mean, sales loves competitive intelligence, right? I mean, they always want to say, give me the nuggets, right? Give me the juicy nuggets on, what's happening in the competition, right? And so helping them to be enabled and helping them to, understand how our competition is messaging and how they're selling is huge for them, right? Because they're the ones who are out in the field. They're the ones talking to prospects, talking to customers. And so is our competition. So they need to understand our competition.
I think that's really interesting that you started in sales enablement, because when you're part of the sales team, it's almost like you're in the boys club, right? And I don't mean to use a gendered term, but you're caucusing with sales. They already view you not as an other in some other department. They view you as one of the group. I think, the topic of our conversation today is really talking about creating a culture of competitive intelligence, and being that you came from a sales enablement background, that actually helps you use competitive intelligence as a catalyst for that collaborative growth, right? Because you've done this before. Maybe you haven't carried a bag, but you're talking the talk and you're walking the walk with a sales guy. Does that actually help in sort of getting them to adopt competitive intelligence as a discipline?
Absolutely. And I think I actually didn't start in sales enablement. I started in sales engineering. So I actually did carry a bag with the sales. And I think that even gave me one step further, because every sales rep, who they lean on the most, they lean on their sales engineer to be that individual who has all that knowledge and technical backing. And so coming into product marketing from a sales engineering background gave me that street cred with sales, but even more importantly with sales engineers, who I think as a competitive individual, as a product marketer, and just as a person of all, sales engineers are the best for knowledge within the organization. They're the ones who are talking to the customer, because a lot of times when you're in a deal, a customer won't tell a sales rep everything, because they're always thinking the sales rep's trying to sell them, but they'll tell the sales engineer so much more about what's going on in their market and what's going on with the competition. And I think that's really where, as product marketers, we can get a ton of information.
Why do you think that is? I mean, do sales engineers almost feel a kinship with other sales engineers? Like, why do you think that there is more of a willingness to share with a sales engineer as opposed to somebody else within the transaction?
Well, I think it's because the sales engineer is the one who's working with them in the POV. They're showing them how to actually use the product, how this product helps them. They're doing a lot more of the technical hands-on approach. And so I think when you're doing that and you're working with a customer as a sales engineer, you get this bond, right? You have this understanding of, hey, I'm helping you solve your problem. And I think this is why sometimes customers and prospects give a sales engineer more intelligence and more information.
So would you recommend, as you're trying to build this cross-functional notion of competitive intelligence, starting to leverage or even lean in further to your sales engineering department because of that idea that they're probably going to be the ones that are getting a lot of this field intel just during the course of their daily lives?
Absolutely. I mean, I think product marketers and competitive intelligence need to lean into the sales engineers. I'm on calls with sales engineers all the time, sales engineering leaderships, and just because they have such a great impact, I think you need to have that ability, right? And so I say this a lot, is, sales engineers, they'll tell you what they love about your battle cards, but they'll more importantly will tell you what they don't love about your battle cards and what you don't love about your competitive intelligence, because they've seen it and they've interacted with it. And that's sometimes where you get more feedback from them.
Let me talk about that negative feedback for a second. It's got to be really directional to get when somebody says, I don't know if I like this, or I don't know if this information is relevant to you. What is the best way for you to receive that type of feedback? Is it in more of an open forum? I'm commenting on this, or somebody is posting it in Slack or in Teams, or do you prefer to sort of receive it, a little bit on the side? Hey, Pat, something you may want to take a look at, a private Slack message, private email. Like, what is the best way that you, as a CI professional, what is the best way for you to receive that information?
For me, anyway, it's possible. Any feedback, feedback.
No ego at all.
No ego. You can't have an ego in competitive intelligence.
Yeah.
Because the minute you put down competitive intelligence, it's outdated, right? And so one of the things you need to do is you need to have that feedback. And so what do I prefer? I prefer one-on-one, because they'll tell me, hey, I disagree with this, or I like this. And then I can go further. I can ask why. What's the reason for? And we can go X, Y, Z. This is really good because it helped me with this customer. I actually tried this. It didn't work out well. Why did it not work out well? Okay, let's change it. What do you think is the best way of going forward?
So you combine those two things together as if to say that not all feedback is negative, not all feedback is positive. It's often couched together, right? You're getting, when you're asking for feedback, it's not coming one way or another. It's coming as both. So it actually gives you some of the positive reinforcement, but also some of the corrective reinforcement that you need.
Absolutely. I mean, you need that. You need both, right? You need that positive reinforcement. Hey, you're doing a good job. Hey, this is helping us out, and here's the proof of that. And then you also need that. Hey, here's the critical, right? Here's how to be critical, and here's why we need to be critical, and here's how we change it. Because the field are the ones who gave us so much information, right? Yeah. They're the ones talking to customers, talking to prospects, and so it's going to change. It's going to tweak. And so I think as a CI person, you need to have that ability to, okay, it didn't work. Let's change it and figure out why.
Outside of sales engineering, for which, again, you feel a certain kinship with, who are some of the other key stakeholders that are giving you that feedback that is, either positive or corrective, and that you are feeling like you want to engage back with them about, hey, either for validation or for otherwise? Like, who are some of the other teams that you're feeling a lot of that back and forth with in creating that culture?
Well, I think, of course, product management, right? Anyone in product marketing has to have an amazing, product management relationship. I say tied at the hip. And I think the reason why is they're the CEOs of their products. And so when you have a product manager, they know a ton about their product, but they also know a lot about the competitor's product as well. And so when you have a really good product manager, they can help you. They can help to build that competitive information and say, hey, this is what I've seen, or this is why we're building this in our product, because we see there's a gap in our competitors as well.
So product management definitely on the list. Sales people themselves, who's been some of the toughest nuts to crack in terms of getting them to come over to your side, your view of competitive intelligence? You're building sort of this culture here. Who have been the more difficult people to get to carry your flag, right?
Well, so I don't think it's one group in particular, but I think it's sometimes change is hard, right? And so I think with individuals sometimes is, they've been relied on a certain battle card that they've used for years, or they've relied on certain, abilities to compete with the competitor. And so when you try to change that and you bring in new ways of to compete, new ways of looking at battle cards, it's difficult, right? Because it's that change that, humans are resistant to. And so it's really having those conversations with those individuals saying, hey, like we're changing the battle cards because we're seeing a change in this competitor's way, or we're growing to a more value-based battle card or value-based competitive intelligence, and just having those conversations and telling them why we're doing this. And I think a lot of times people just want to be heard, and a lot of times people want to understand, why are we doing this? And so this is why we have those conversations.
So how do you change those hearts and minds? You mentioned having conversations. So a one-to-one approach certainly works.
Absolutely.
Is there a one-to-many approach that can also work? Because obviously doing the politicking and the glad handing and saying, hey, I'm going to sit with you and explain this, but there's got to be other ways where you can do this in more of a broadcast fashion, right?
Absolutely. And I think the way of doing that is sales enablement, right? I think we have an amazing sales enablement team. Amy McCormick, who runs our sales enablement, is awesome. And she understands competitive intelligence and she gets it. And so I think one of the things that's really valuable is having her as a partner with competitive intelligence. So then when we do, different weekly enablement sessions, I can be there and I can be on a lot of them talking about how we're doing different ways in competitive intelligence, how we're showing that, and then getting support and having people raise their hands and say, yeah, this is really helpful. I really love this. So you kind of get this crowd momentum of, people are starting to get in and then people want to go with the crowd.
So we're going to talk about partnerships in a second, because I think that's a really good itch to scratch. But once you've gotten into the sales enablement processes, when we're talking about one-to-many communications, they already have some of those communications channels set up, right? So what you're finding is you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're just working with your sales enablement counterparts and saying, let me bolt on to what it is that you're doing. Hey, if you're doing a weekly meeting with the sales team about something, let me jump in on that as well. For example, right? Like what are some of those other methods that they're using that you're sort of able to, catch the wave and sort of ride in on?
Yeah, I think it's like, it's those weekly sessions. It's being involved right from the front. So when you onboard, what's one of the first things you see? Competitive intelligence. So they're right there. So as a new rep comes in, competitive intelligence is right in front of them. And I think there's other things as well. Like, so one of the things when I came into Imperva, I thought was, hey, we don't have a competitive Slack channel. I created a competitive Slack channel, and now it's one of the most popular Slack channels because people are always asking questions. And it's also great because I'm not the only one answering questions. Other people are answering questions too. So I'm starting to crowdsource competitive intelligence too, which is even so much better.
So that's the culture thing we're talking about, right? I mean, exactly. That is the notion of having a watering hole, for the lack of a better term, Slack. Anywhere you are in the world, you can participate in the conversation. And you're finding that given that it's such a well-trafficked Slack channel, people are excited to participate. It's gone from being, the cat's channel or the baby's channel. It's now the competitive channel, and people are stoked to be able to offer either some piece of intel or answer a question or comment on something. And how did you get to that point? Was it just the existence of the channel, or did you have to sort of poke people on the way and say, hey, can you jump in on this? I think you may have a relevant piece of relevant answer to this question.
Well, 2 points. One, my goal is to overtake the Imperva Pets channel, but I don't think I'm ever going to do that. That's that is our cat channel. That is our dog channel. I don't think I'll ever take over that. I mean, it's a great channel, but second question is, yeah, it was poking. It was actually having people come in and say, hey, can you answer this? Can you look at this? Hey, do you mind? You gave me a great resource on competitive. Do you mind posting the competitive channel? Because people aren't going to, all of a sudden just jump into a channel and start posting. You have to poke people. But after a few pokes, people started understanding it and getting it. Now you see more people asking questions, answering questions, sharing feedback, and it's been very powerful.
Yeah, the channel has to be lit up on their little sidebar more frequently than not in order for them to feel like there's something going on there. And it can't always be you posting. So you're doing a little bit more side Slacks, little back channeling, be like, hey, you saw this question come in, you have the best answer for it. Can you jump in on this? Right? It's just... Exactly. It's cashing in some political chips, but at the end of the day, what it has created is sort of a groundswell of support, right?
Yeah. And it's also helping people, become knowledge experts as well. So when I'm helping other individuals, I'm like, hey, I know you know this answer because you know this competitor very well, or you know this product well. It's boosting them up as well. It's helping them to be shown in the company as well.
Well, I think that's you've mentioned battle cards a couple of times as a competitive intelligence deliverable. But I've heard this notion that really anything can be a competitive intelligence deliverable, right? Intelligence in and of itself it's data that's being delivered by a centralized team to a distributed team. So you've got either centralized location to find it, e.g. A battle card, it's more standardized, or really a Slack channel in and of itself can also be a way for you to deliver competitive intelligence. So they're absorbing it, and you said so yourself, they're leveling up their own knowledge just by being there, just by reading, just by participating, just by, even just seeing it on their phone at night, right? They're gaining value just by being a part of this conversation that's ongoing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I always say is competitive intelligence, everyone says it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I think competitive intelligence is a triathlon, right? Right after you finish that run, you still have to do that swim and that bike. And so you always need to be pushing competitive intelligence to the field, to everyone, whether that's Slack, email, uh, presentations, battle cards, enablement sessions, all these different things. You always need to be feeding them more and more, because that's how you're going to get them to absorb it and how to get them to, understand it, and it almost becomes second nature.
We put a pin in the partnership discussion a second ago, because I think that's really important. Is that I don't know that competitive intelligence programs are built from one single person. I think you alluded to that. Who are some of the more surprising respondents or surprising participants in that competitive intelligence Slack channel? Like, oh, I didn't expect to see that guy or that gal, that person in here commenting on something. And when you see that type of interaction, do you think, oh, I gotta put this in the back of my mind? I may go to them later on down the road to sort of build another partnership and sort of, angle my growth even in a different direction, right?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that's been really powerful is the Office of CTO and Imperva. They've been a ton of helpful because they have a ton of knowledge on technically. And so we have individuals who from the Office of CTO are actually posting, answers and into questions. Another one, sales engineers, they are always been individuals there, and also the specialists too. We have specialists on Imperva, and so some of them are been really powerful at, hey, I'm a specialist in this product, so therefore when a question comes up in this product, I can be the one to kind of help answer that as well, and they kind of grow their value.
Interesting that you say the Office of the CTO. That is a group of individuals that are ostensibly be extremely technical and really getting into the weeds on individual features, APIs, SOC 2 certifications, things like that. I guess how much value can be derived from that, or is everybody who's competing knows that you're competing in a battleground with laymen, so they are able to ratchet down the level of technicality in order to get to the right level? Like, how have you found that to be with that audience in particular in the Slack channel and in interacting in all forms?
So I mean, our CTO and our Office CTO are brilliant by far. And I think, what they do very well is they understand the market and they understand our place very well. And so, of course, they're going to know our competition, and they know a ton about our competition because they're evaluating different products. They're looking at different, technologies. And of course, our competition comes by. So they always, have that little, okay, I saw this, or I've seen this. And so they kind of gather all this great information. So then when someone asks questions like, hey, can competitor X do this, or I need help against this competitor, they just pop in the notes and go, oh, I see this, boom, 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 as we were evaluating different technologies. And they actually have a ton of great competitive intelligence.
I also have to assume that as a company with an office of a CTO, your CTO often is at trade shows, conferences, things like that. For smaller companies where your CTO, SVP of engineering, otherwise, they're much more player coaches. If you have a company of that size, that is a person who's a very public representative of the company, and therefore they're doing things that are not dissimilar to the way a sales guy would be on the floor of a conference, right? So you're actually getting an even different perspective from an executive level or even chief of staff level source of intel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kunal, our CTO, he talks to customers. He's a thought leader, and so his team members they talk to customers. They're thought leaders, and it really they get a different perspective of our competition than other individuals like sales, and so it's a great partnership as well.
What other partners or people that are on your speed dial when something comes up and you got to get them? You mentioned the product management team. You mentioned your sales team. How does customer success interact with competitive intel? They're talking with customers all the time. I presume they would be bringing little nuggets of intel about your competition back into that ongoing conversation throughout with the rest of the company.
Yeah, I think customer success is an awesome partner within competitive intelligence, and it's bilateral, right? It's I'm helping out customer success and making sure they understand our competition, and it's them bringing back nuggets, bringing back feedback of, hey, we had conversations with our customers, we had this, and it's also about building trust too, right? It's making sure that they understand the trust. So, but I think our customer success org is great, and I think they have a ton of great information for me and for everyone.
With customer success, it's often like, look, your sales team may lose a competitive deal, and that sucks, right? But when your customer success team is running the risk of losing an existing customer, that's almost felt even more painful for a company, right? So I have to assume that for them, competitive intelligence means even just a little bit more because they're using it as a defense mechanism as opposed to having an attack posture like other departments, right? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And across the board, I think one of the things I always say is we shouldn't be attacking our competitors. We should be highlighting our strengths.
Yep.
And I think both our sales and our customer success do a great job of that. But I think you're right. Customer success, it's a different type of conversation, and it's more of, hey, let's show you what we can do. Let's make sure you're feeling better. Make sure everything's positive. Versus sales, where it's, hey, let's make sure we win the business. Customers, we already won the business. How do we continue the business? How do we grow the business?
So it's maintaining an air of positivity, even though there might be a threat. There's a shark in the water. It's almost like still remain focused on customer value, even in light of a competitor in the space.
Absolutely. And I think one thing you said was like, you might lose to a competitor, right? We're always going to lose. And I think, understanding why we win, and even more importantly, why we lose, and understanding why we lost is important too, right? And I think I think having that for competitive intelligence is huge. If we lose a deal, we need to learn from it.
So that is a really great point, and I'm glad you brought it up. We talk a lot, both on this podcast and really generally as competitive intelligence professionals, about this notion of competitive win-loss analysis. And I think personally, and I maybe you agree, that could be a really great element to create that culture of competitive intelligence. Because as a closed won deal comes in, people should be like stoked about that, shouting from the rooftops, particularly if you beat a competitor along the way. But to your point, if you lose, and you're always going to lose, you're never going to win every deal. You use that lost opportunity as a learning or a teaching moment, right? Are you able to sort of break through that and use competitive win-loss as a way to sort of continue those competitive conversations? Are they good data points for you, right?
Absolutely. I think some of the best data points you get are from wins and losses. I mean, wins because we should be touting it. We should be having that conversations. Shout out from the rooftops. But losses too. It's, why did we lose? What happened? How can we change that? How can we make it better? I think always learning from your losses is probably one of the most important things you can do in TI. Let's
unpack that for a second. Learning from your losses. And yes, it's alliterative, so of course that perks my ears up. But how have you been able to process size that learning from your losses? Do you have a group of individuals that sort of get together and talk about these things, whether it be offline or online? Like, how do you processize learning from your losses in such a way that allows you to affect strategy and tactics for CI moving forward?
Well, I mean, it's always hard. No one really wants to talk about losses. No one's like, hey, let's get on a call and talk about our losses, right? It's not something people are thrilled about.
That's why I'm asking, because I don't know of a product marketer on the planet that really wants to go up to a sales rep and be like, how come we lost this deal? No, tell me for real. Like, I listened to the gong. Like, no one. That's an uncomfortable conversation to have. Yeah. That's money that isn't in the back of that rep's pocket. So how have you had those difficult conversations?
Well, I think it's a combination of different things. I think it's leadership being on board on that. Yeah. I think it's also, at building trust with your sales, having that ability to say, hey, I'm here for you when you need help on competitive. And so when I ask you for help, or I ask for, have a conversation on why we won there, why we lost, it's building that trust and building that relationship. And I think that's one thing that you really need to have as a CI individual, is that trust with your sales org, to understand that whatever they tell you, it stays between you and them. It doesn't go to across the whole organization, and having that trust is huge.
Interesting. So there is a notion in your mind of being a little bit more on the record, off the record, right? Yeah. So on the record, we talk about losses. Perhaps we catalog some reasons. We bubble those up. We understand why. Fine. Off the record, oh yeah, they mentioned this. You didn't hear it directly from me and from my op, but I still think it's relevant, and I don't necessarily want this broadcast to the world. Is that what you mean by coming to you and trusting and holding things close to the vest, almost like a journalist, where there's certain things that are off the record that can still be reported? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of like that. I think some sales reps are hey, I don't really want to talk about this, and so I'm like, sure, well, why don't you just tell me, and it's not from you, And if we can dig into it more and we can have conversations. And it's building that trust with those sales reps and having that understand that, you're a valued asset for them. So that then they can realize, okay, Pat's the guy that I can go to when I need help. And I can also give Pat information, and he's not going to put it all over Slack and show the entire company.
How did leadership buy into competitive win-loss analysis as a method to build CI culture? Like, was it the all the way up to the CRO or your head of sales that said, hey, there's some relevant information here. Let's dive into this. Let's ask the uncomfortable questions. Like, when you say leadership, at what level does that need to get to in order to influence that level of change?
Well, so I'm pretty lucky. I have an awesome CMO, Julian, and an awesome CRO, Scott, and they understood it. They get the value of it. And so I think that's where I'm in a different place than a lot of people, but they get the value of it because they realize that this is how we're going to get better. And so having two, amazing executives to help you out and to, build that out is really powerful, because they can have the ability to say, yeah, here's the budget, here's the ability to go do it. Let's make sure it gets done.
So with those two guys, you walked in and they already understood the value. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you were in a different situation and those two guys didn't understand it. What is the method by which you go in there and be like, we have to start having some hard conversations with our reps, whether it be process focused or even just one-to-one, about close won, close loss opportunities, in order to understand what it is we're either doing wrong or doing right, and doubling down on either one of those two directions? Like, how do you start to influence those leaders if they weren't already influenced from the get-go?
Well, I think it's a little bit of showing them how the value, right? So why do you need to do this, right? What's the point of this, right? Why are you going to bother my reps with, reaching out to them, having them time when they should
reps, they belong to me, right?
Why should you do that? And luckily I don't have that here, but I have that in other organizations where they're my reps. Why are you going to talk to them? What they should be selling? And I think when you have it, when you have individuals who are like, I understand this, I get it, this is why it's going to happen, because yes, I'm going to take a little time out of their day to have conversations about why they won, why they lost. So then we can make it repeatable. So we can make it, repeatable. This is why we're winning against company X. This is why we're losing. This is what we need to change, making it a repeatable process.
So when you run up against a wall like that, a chief revenue officer who, is taking ownership over his employees' time, you're trying to say that, well, this is time well spent. This is a half an hour out of their workday. The rising tide raises all boats sort of a situation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That's fascinating. Same thing goes for customer success leadership, I presume. Getting in there and talking to individual CS reps. I got to believe it's similar tactics with other key leaders in various parts of the organization. You just got to show them the value, what they're going to get from CI, but CWLA even more so, and having those valuable conversations.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like how reps sell, they sell value, right? I'm selling a value of a different type of product. I'm selling a way of, hey, how we actually make it better and how we can help the company.
Is there a way to do this, create this culture of competitive intelligence without existential threats, right? So I think about the auto industry, Detroit and otherwise, and they didn't really have a good fully electric car for forever. Like, Tesla had no competitors for a very long time, the luxury electric vehicle. And it wasn't until recently that these companies started to double down on the luxury electric automobile, to the point where, now, there's Polestar, and there's, the electric Beamer and the electric Audi and the electric Mercedes-Benz. Like, if I have to assume, I don't know this for certain, but why would they need a competitive intelligence program if they didn't have any existential threats? Did you ever feel any challenges within your organization from the organization itself not believing that they had any one of those major challenges to their position, and therefore it was more difficult to create this culture? And if so, like, how did you break through that?
So yeah, I actually had a previous company I've had a while ago, and basically it was, they didn't think they had the competition, and they didn't think they needed that area. And so there's different industries, right? There's some industries which are hyper competitive.
Yep.
And industries where, there's not so much competitors. And so it was, having that problem was difficult, because it was, saying, hey, right now we might not have a lot of competitors, but in 2 years, we're going to have a ton of competitors.
Got it. So you're trying to get people to predict the future and look 3 steps ahead of where we are now. There is a world where if these little guys start to get bigger and start to get bigger, suddenly they're going to be a problem. So you're basically making the case that we're preparing ourselves for the oncoming storm, essentially.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not even just these little guys getting big. It's sometimes the bigger guys moving down too, right? It was like, okay, there's some other bigger competitors out there that if they turn on the juice, if they turn on the gas, they can take the market by storm.
Got it. So it's almost looking at somebody who is in an adjacent market, and they might be developing a much more junior product that's competitive to yours. Hey, we still got an advantage over these guys. We can still pound them in the market by saying they're too diversified. That's too basic of a product. We have the industry advantage on those features and functionality. But you're basically making the case that, well, what if they spun up 2 more engineering teams? How long would it take to get that product to where we are now? A year, 2 years? That's basically the case that you're making, is that you never know when they're going to show up, but when they do, you better be prepared, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know when they show up, and you always have to prepare for that, right? You always have to have, plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's what I always say with competitive intelligence. And so it's kind of making sure that you look at them and you say, okay, who's our friends, who's our frenemies, who's our enemies, and who could be an enemy, 2 years down the road? Who's the people that, scare me, that if one day they wake up and they say, hey, I want to go do this.
Plan for the worst, hope for the best. That's your mantra in terms of competitive intelligence and creating a culture, right? Yeah. And is it getting people to recognize that it might be sunny days now, but there could be rainy ones ahead? Is that what that plan for the worst means? And just assume that it's going to be sunny, but you never know when you need an umbrella, right?
Well, so I don't think it's sunny versus rain. I think we always have to be happy and always say, it's sunny right now, but we always have to be careful that there may be cloud coverage coming, right? And so there might not be cloud coverage now, or there might be cloud coverage now, and it might be sunny later. But it's just making sure that people understand that there's always a learning thread around the corner.
Yes, it's calibrating people's belief system, or at least their awareness of the current landscape, to recognize that what is happening today may not be the same way it is tomorrow or a year from now.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
I think another good mantra of competitive intelligence is you always have to kind of talk about your wins and be positive and show that you have the best product out there. I think sometimes have some swagger, if I could say, and make sure that people understand that hey, we have a great product. It does a great job. People see value. They understand the value of it and continue going. I think sometimes if you talk too much about those rainy days or those cloud covers, it can get down. And so you have to always have that positive view on life as well.
Or they tune you out, right? Like, oh, hey, Pat, all you're bringing me is bad news. I don't really want to hear it anymore. And basically what you're saying is sometimes you give them a little spoonful of sugar, which will help the medicine go down. Where have I heard that before? But that you really got to sweeten it a little bit when you're talking about competitive things, right?
Absolutely.
When you're building out this culture, this collaboration, the entire company getting on board with things. We mentioned Slack, or at least a chat app, as a way to engage with team members. What other types of tools, whether you mention them by name or otherwise, are you using in order to engage with a broader audience and a broader group of stakeholders, in order to make sure they're paying attention to these things?
Yeah, I think competitive platforms are huge, right? I think having a competitive platform is massive, because it's a one source of truth for competitive intelligence.
Yep.
And I think that's one big problem that everyone has, right? Is that you have a lot of different places where there's competitive intelligence, Gmail, Google Docs, someone's laptop, in someone's head, and it's not all centralized. And so people are seeing multiple different pieces of information. Having it one central place for competitive intelligence is key. And the reason why I think it's key is because sales reps, sales engineers, everyone has so much stuff on their plates, and they have so much stuff coming at them all the time, right? If they can go to one place and say, this is the most up-to-date competitive intelligence, and this is where I'm going to see it, it's hands down shows the value of a competitive intelligence program.
Now, but one thing about Slack, though, is that it is something that everybody in the company has access to, whereas not everybody will have access to other new systems. Have you been able to get CI into your CRM? Have you been able to get that into sales enablement tools? Like, have you been able to plug or get hooks into or access points to your CI materials in other locations where people may be spending more of their time?
Absolutely. And one of the things I said is I want CI to be wherever you are.
Okay.
So I want CI to be, if you're in Salesforce and you're putting down that competitor in Salesforce, I want you to be able to see that information there. If you're in Guru, which is our sales and content platform, and you're looking at information there, I want you to be using that. If you're in Slack, I want you to find it in Slack. I want you to be able to find competitive intelligence wherever you are, because you have so little time for them to see it that you want them to see it quickly, browse through it, say, yep, I understand it, and they're on to the next thing.
Have you tried to engage with a team in such a way where it's like testing their knowledge? Have you tried to poke and prod and to see, I mean, look, there's so much messaging, there's so many things flying around all the time. What methods do you use to sort of gauge people's understanding of the messaging you're putting out? Or do you not do that at all and just like hope for the best? Or I'm curious as to how you've been able to take people's temperature with regards to competitive intelligence knowledge.
I think the way I look at it is like, I hope they're reading it. I hope they're understanding it.
Yes.
But I always want to make sure that people are understanding it. So I use team calls. I go on team calls. I go on management calls, and I understand, and I try to look and say what people are asking for. Mm-hmm. What are the needs people are asking for? And that kind of gives me a gauge of, okay, are people understanding it because they're asking for this a lot? Maybe I need to do another enablement session, a redo, because there's been a lot more reps. Or is it more of, hey, you know what I'm seeing is that a lot of requests are coming in for this certain competitor. Maybe it's time to bump them up into the content crew, so I actually go out and build some intelligence on them.
Interesting. So part of building this culture, no one's going to tell you what they don't know, because there's a certain amount of ego that comes along with that. But mm-hmm. they will ask questions because they feel like there's a way for them to better understand something or engage with you on a particular topic. You're using those questions as a way to ascertain what level of understanding people have, because those become extremely revealing as it pertains to people's overall absorption of the information.
Absolutely. And I think also it's on a curve, right? You're going to have reps who don't look at it and, they're just going to do their thing. You're going to have the majority of reps have that, about 80% knowledge, and you're going to have reps who are going to be almost competitive experts themselves, right? And so it's having that curve and understanding, where the majority of the individuals are. And
when you say curve, you mean like a bell curve. Yep. So there's going to be 80% of your reps in the middle are going to have on a scale of 1 to 10, an 8 level of knowledge. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some that are your superstars, they're going to be at a 10, and there are going to be others, either junior or maybe not the best in your organization, at between a 1 and a 5, that are eventually going to have to step up their game. You're aiming for the middle, I would say, predominantly, right? You're aiming for that 80%.
Absolutely. I'm aiming for the 80%, but the ones I really care about are those ones were 1 to 5, right? Because I think, competition wise, you're only as good as your worst rep, right? And so I think you want to make sure that those individuals understand the competition. So that's why I'm always being repetitive, but absolutely I'm shooting for that 80.
That's interesting. That's not very Darwin-esque of you, right? It's, it would be, ostensibly it would be survival of the fittest, right? So if these 1 to 5s are losing deals, and perhaps that's because they're not paying attention to competitive intelligence, they'll eventually, hit the bricks, get out of here. You're not selling enough. In your mind, focus on the lower end, because it's eventually going to feed everybody else throughout the curve. If you can make the worst rep better, then you're also making a better rep better, and the best reps better if you're spending that time. Am I catching you or understanding what you're saying?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think it's also, there's going to be certain reps who love competitive intelligence, and they're going to be in there all the time. And there's other reps who are going to be talking different ways. And so they might not be engaging in competitive intelligence. So those might be the 1 to 5s where they're not a bad rep. They're actually a great rep, but they haven't grasped onto that competitive intelligence range yet. And so that's where I'm always trying to focus. And that's why I'm constantly in their face talking about competitive intelligence, so that I can get those 1 to 5s on further up the bell curve.
In my time in enterprise companies, I've learned to start to describing enterprise sales as like free-form jazz. There's no sheet music. I mean, if you come up against a sales rep that's reading from a script, that's probably not a great sales rep. They need to be thinking on the fly. in what ways can your culture of competitive intelligence sort of influence those reps? So they're not necessarily reading directly from the talking points, but they are able to, like you just said, weave that into the way that they're selling.
Yeah. Well, I think when you build a competitive culture, when you go into a deal, when you talk to a customer, you always have to have that knowledge in the background that who else are they talking to? Who else is their competition? And how can I always have that conversation to differentiate? How can I always, whether they actually are talking to someone or not, making sure that pitch, that conversation is showing our differentiation and our value and showing that, we're a trusted advisor to them.
We've been talking a little bit about one-to-one communication, you directly to sales reps or other stakeholders, leadership and otherwise. Talked a little bit about one-to-many at the team level. So going to a team of individuals within Slack, a team of individuals within individual departments. I want to talk for a second about one-to-many. So getting up in front of a company meeting, putting something in the general Slack channel. How empowered have you felt, whether it be at Imperva or at other organizations, to be able to be the person up in front of the entire organization, whether it be for a company meeting or a yearly kickoff, and say, hey, here's our competition. This is what they're up to. And everybody to a person needs to start thinking about things this way. Like, how have you thought about those big broadcast communications about competitive intel? And has that helped in building that company-wide culture of competitive intelligence?
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you do this, whether it's a kickoff, whether it's a company meeting, whether it's a Slack, you need to understand that there's different levels of expertise in competitive intelligence. So I think sometimes competitive intelligence people, they blast something and they're like, everyone's at the sales level or everyone's at this high level of competition. And there's other parts of the organization that may not know our competitors very well and may not understand. So I think giving them a market overview of who our competition is, or also just, hey, here, let's just do a refresh so that everyone can see it and everyone can understand it, is a huge piece of information. Because then it starts people saying, oh, okay, this is why we're doing this in marketing. This is why we're doing this in engineering. And it really gives them a value of, okay, we're all as one competitive culture.
And in the company meeting, where do you sit? Right. So CEO is going to get up and do his big thing. And then perhaps either somebody in the revenue organization or the product organization goes next. Where do you slot into that company meeting generally? Are you after the sales org? Are you after the CEO? Like, where do you feel at least either the right place to be, or where have you been placed in order to either capture people's attention or fit within the context of the conversation?
So I think it varies by company, right? I mean, I think some companies are going to have the executives. I think other companies are going to have individuals. So I think it varies by. I've been at companies where it's prior to the kickoff, they have some competitive intelligence beforehand. So it kind of gets them ready for the kickoff. I've been times where it's, hey, you're slotted in day 2 or 3 as the competitive individual area because of that. And I've also in times where it's, and I like this is actually how I've done it's the last session of the day. So, at 4:00 comes around, everyone's like, oh my God, I've been here for how long?
Yeah.
and they just want to get out and have cocktails, right? They want to go out and talk to their friends. So what I've done is competitive cocktails. So I actually bring cocktails into the competition.
Come on.
Yeah, I've done it. And basically, so you have cocktails and talk about competition, because what's better than having a beer and talking about competitive? I think it's been one of my best ones I've ever done, and it was awesome.
You want to talk about free-flowing conversation.
Exactly.
There's a lot more truth in an empty beer glass than there is in a full one, right? Yeah. I mean, so way to loosen tongues, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah. But it was great because people were relaxed. They weren't all tired about 4:00, last one. People got, okay, we're gonna relax, but we're talking about competition and we're gonna have a great conversation.
But you've literally tied a knot between competitive intelligence and regular camaraderie and socialization, which would happen at a happy hour, right? Like, that's the whole point of these things. You've literally bolted those two things together and made that, an enormously powerful place to share and receive competitive intel.
Yeah. And it was relaxing. So people realize, oh, he's fun. He's having a great time. And it actually paid dividends later, because people were like, okay, now Pat's relaxing. We had a great conversation when we're all having drinks. Now I'll tell him more information. And, people reached out further.
If there's one thing I'll take away from this conversation, it's competitive cocktails. It's like, absolutely the best way that I've ever heard to engage with your company on the topic of rival intel. No matter how reluctant they may be to talk about their competitors, and as Pat alluded to, there is some reluctance, putting a cocktail in their hand and connecting the professional camaraderie of a happy hour and the hard news gathering of a CI program is an amazing idea. But I was curious, what was the biggest thing that Patrick isn't doing as part of his building of a competitive culture program that he'd like to start doing in the future?
So I'm doing this now, but I want to do more is get on more calls, get on more sales calls, talk to customers, have those conversations, because that's where the real juice is. Like, I'm not the guy to build battle cards in a cubicle. I want to be on calls. I want to have conversations with reps. I want to listen in. And I think that's incredibly valuable because you're showing value from the competitive program, but you're also understanding what customers are thinking and hearing. So that's what I would do if I had an extra 2-3 hours of my time, but just get on more calls, listen to more areas, and just be another source for intelligence.
Pat, I can tell you right now, I only have water in this mug, but you're the kind of guy that I would not mind having a beer and talking about competitive with. So
let's do it.
Thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and cannot wait to do this again sometime.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. This is fun.
That's it. That's the ball game. Here's the buzzer, and our time together is up. Having Pat from Imperva on the podcast is a true pleasure, and I cannot thank him enough for joining me. Creating a culture of competitive intelligence isn't easy, but quite frankly, it isn't supposed to be. Helping your teammates understand the inherent challenges that exist within your marketplace may not be difficult to do, but making them believe that there's something they can do about it is where there's a bit of a heavy lift. I particularly like Patrick's take on building partnerships with senior leaders of key groups within the organization, up to and including the office of the CTO, which is nominally a very technical part of the company, but clearly one that's rife with amazing competitive intel. Regardless of your organizational structure or your own company's capabilities, when it comes to competing in a volatile market, it absolutely has to be a team effort. But if you've got a topic that's related to competitive intelligence and you want to discuss it on a future podcast, just reach out. I'm pretty active in the PMA Slack team, so look for me in the competitive intelligence channel or just send me an email at eric@crayon.co. Thanks for listening to the Product Marketing Alliance podcast, Into the Fray, presented by Crayon. If you liked what you've heard, please consider hitting the subscribe button, either on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Erik Mansur, and until next time, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure you get out there and compete like you mean it.